Good evening, Corona Days Professional Development Group. It's me, Danette Edwards. Thank you all for being here this evening, and I'm apologizing in advance because I am in New York, so I'm not home. So this is like an ad hoc kind of thing. Not ad hoc, I know it was happening, but I had to come home for some family business. I'm in the kitchen at home, okay? I'm in New York at home, not at home in Baltimore. So anyway, this evening, I am so glad and honored to have Elizabeth Laba here. And she's going to talk to us about making your passion work for you, okay? So she's going to cover finding your why, using networking, social media, and your personal brand to develop your why and enhance your professional career, and a little about Elizabeth. So, learning Black history changed Elizabeth's life, and that's why she became a social justice warrior. After a recent feature in the New York Times article about her social justice advocacy work, Elizabeth was motivated to launch Black History and Culture Academy, a subscription-based e-learning platform that includes 20-plus courses in African history and culture, African American history and culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Elizabeth is a college professor and was named a LinkedIn top voice in education. She hosts the EdUp Experience podcast. Elizabeth is also a published writer. Her most recent writing includes an op-ed piece on racial profiling for CNN that had more than 2 million views on their news website. Most recently, she's been working as an instructional design manager, developing online classes for more than 1,000 students at a small career college in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I'm going to bring Liz on right now, okay? Hey, Liz, how you doing?
Hi, Danette. How are you?
I'm well. Hey, thank you for joining. Thank
you for having me.
I'm glad that you're here. I always have fun when I'm with you. This is our third time sitting down. So my first time was on your podcast, the EdUp Experience. And then I was with you and Future a couple weeks ago. I think that was last month. Now that we're in May, that was sometime in April. So now you're here in Corona Days. So let me ask you my little fun questions first, okay?
All right. Okay.
So, first of all, okay, this will be one of my questions because I don't know. Vegan or carnivore?
Carnivore.
All right. So that helps me. That helps me with this question. Oxtails or curry chicken?
Oxtails. Definitely.
Apple Mac or PC?
PC.
I'm a PC girl too. Although my computer crashed last month, so I'm on the edge. I'm thinking about doing a Mac. Okay, so go on vacation, Hawaii or Aruba?
Hawaii.
Okay. And my last one, and guys, you know why I'm asking these questions, because we have a giveaway during this series, the Professionals of Excellence series. We have quite a few giveaways, and you might be quizzed on some of Liz's answers. So you stay tuned. Okay, vanilla or chocolate?
Vanilla.
All right, that's cool. I like vanilla too, especially if it's Haagen-Dazs. All right, guys. So guys, thank you for joining. I'm going to turn it over to Liz, who's going to talk to us about making your passion work for you. And then I'm going to come back in with questions for Liz. Hopefully you guys will have some questions. You'll put them in the chat wherever you are. I know some of you haven't given the okay to see your names, but that's okay. So I'm turning it over to you, Liz. And I'm going to remove myself, but I'm here.
Thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. I'm excited because I have to start by saying that Danette is one of my favorite people on LinkedIn. And I think it kind of speaks to what I want to talk about today, because I think a lot of my journey over the past year, a lot of that has been shaped by the people that I have communicated with, networked with, come into contact with over the past year on LinkedIn. And I think it speaks to the idea of community. And I know just from all of the work that Danette has been doing that community and building community is a really big thing for her. So I want to think in terms of just how much building community has shaped me in terms of how I was able to find my why. I think sometimes especially as a professional, you go to school, you work in a particular field. For me, it has been working in higher ed. And I always felt like my calling was to be a teacher. But over the past year, that has evolved and changed and grown. And in terms of finding my why and what I want to talk about as far as finding your why, was that I think for me, I tended to limit my scope because I felt like I was only able to make an impact in the classroom. That was my comfort zone. That was where I had developed and grown my skills from working in higher education. I didn't start out in the classroom. I started out as an admissions counselor, but I worked in the classroom for over a decade. And I felt like, well, the classroom was my comfort zone. I was comfortable with my students. I was comfortable with my role as a faculty member. I was even comfortable with the courses that I was teaching. You know, I taught the same classes year after year, and it just became, as I was on autopilot, I would have different groups of students, so I was able to impact different groups and cohorts of students. But in terms of my ability to impact beyond the scope of my college or university where I was teaching, I didn't necessarily feel like that was something that I was destined to do. And it wasn't until I became really active on LinkedIn and started to really network and look at what other people were doing. And that's, I guess, back to this whole idea of community. That's why I'm so in awe and admiration of what Danette has done in terms of building this community with Corona Days Professional Development Group, because of the fact that for most of us, we are working in a bubble or a silo, whether that's an organization, whether that's our particular focus in terms of our career. Maybe it's the area where we live. Maybe we're in a particular state or a tri-county area or a region. And that's basically what we see. And what LinkedIn, and by extension, Corona Days Professional Development Group, what it was able to provide me with last year when I became really active on it was a totally different mind frame. It gave me a national scope as well as a global scope, and the ability to understand that, wow, I work in the classroom, but the classroom doesn't have to be a physical classroom. I can actually extend myself beyond just where I work, beyond just what I do. And maybe being a teacher and educating doesn't have to only happen within the scope of my classroom. And finding my why really started to evolve and become an internal process for me. I posted about this actually over the weekend, so it's actually serendipitous that we're speaking about this today, because finding my why, a lot of that was a journey of self-discovery and me thinking about, well, what am I passionate about? What do I love? How do I feel when I talk about certain things? And that actually evolved into my passion for social justice. But I think it really doesn't have to be necessarily social justice. It doesn't have to be being a writer. It doesn't have to be being a teacher. It really is whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you smile. And a lot of that journey for me became stepping into authenticity and truth. I think as a teacher, I had this facade of control. You go into the classroom, and even though I'm very lighthearted, I try to keep it real with my students, I try to be down to earth, still there was a certain amount of I can only show so much. I have this persona, and this is a persona that my students need to see. This is what my administration needs to see. This is what other faculty members need to see. And that persona was very curated. And even when I first got on LinkedIn, I did the same thing. I had a curated persona, and that was what I wanted to show. I wasn't job hunting at that particular time, but I still wanted to show a professional persona. And for me, a lot of my journey has been stepping into, well, who is Liz? Who do I want to be? What do I want to become? How can I develop that? And what is my passion? And what do I feel strongly about? What makes me happy? What makes me smile? What is my real, authentic truth? And I think for me, a part of that journey has been thinking about advocacy and how to help people beyond the scope of just my classroom, and how I can amplify my voice and create a voice that is magnified and also amplify the voices of other people. So I think in finding my why, or I guess tips or strategies for finding a why, a lot of that boils down to your authentic voice. Who are you, and what makes you tick? What makes you happy? What creates authentic truth for you in your mind? What does that look like? And I think for me, that process also dealt with being vulnerable and being able to let my guard down and being able to not worry about what other people thought of me. Because I think a lot of it as well, in terms of being a Black woman, being a woman, being a Black woman, being someone that works in a sphere, education, where you're always supposed to have the answers. A lot of that also dealt with the idea of I didn't have to have all the answers, right? In order to find my why, a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it was thinking about, well, let's try this thing. And if this thing doesn't work, maybe I'll try something else. So with your why, a lot of that why can evolve over time. It doesn't mean that your be all end all is one thing, right? I love this. When you show your authentic self on a platform, it becomes easier to connect, because people don't want to connect with something that isn't really you. Who are you? So being able to let your wall down a little bit, and maybe it's not with everybody. Maybe you have a select small, and that's how it started for me. It was a small networking group of higher education professionals that I started to feel comfortable with. And I started to let my walls down. And it was like, oh, they don't think I'm weird. They don't think that's unusual. They don't think that that's unprofessional, right? So the more that I got positive reinforcement of, that's awesome. That's really insightful. I never thought of that. The more that I got that encouragement. But if I had never stepped out and started to engage, if I had never stepped out and started to question or started to give feedback or started to develop some of these relationships, start these conversations, then I wouldn't have gotten that positive feedback. So I think a lot of finding your why is creating the ability to be vulnerable, creating the ability to be authentic, creating the ability to be open. The more open that you are, the more that you're able to get that positive reinforcement, the more that you're able to build those trusted connections. And I would say, without any hesitation, that the last year of being on LinkedIn and being so open and vocal and authentic and raw has been the most growth I've had in my professional career. I've had the most opportunities, bar none. And I've been in education, higher education, for the most part of 20 years. I spent a few years working as the editor of the Seminole Tribune, which is a small tribal reservation newspaper here in South Florida. But other than that, the bulk of the past 2 decades has been spent in higher education. And this past year, bar none, I've met more people, had more opportunities for growth, had more opportunities to try things that I never thought I would have. I never thought I would start or be a part of the startup of a huge higher education podcast. We have about 50,000 streams. We've interviewed college presidents. We just interviewed George Floyd's uncle, who's a social, who is a social justice warrior now after the murder of his nephew, president of Howard University, president of Spelman. If you would have told me last year that I would have been doing that, I'd have been like, no way. Like, how could I possibly do that? But I think that really speaks to the power of finding your why. It speaks to the power of trying different things that you really don't necessarily maybe think that you can do. And I think a lot of that, we hear about this idea of imposter syndrome, and I kind of push back against that in a sense, because a lot of us, we know we belong in places. We have an idea that, hey, I know I should be great, or I know there's so many things that I can do, but we have gotten pushback from other people. I don't even know if necessarily it's us internally saying we're imposters, that sometimes other people act like we don't belong. So then we start to tell each other, well, they don't think I belong, maybe I don't belong, right? It's not that we initially just think we're imposters. It's really this idea of not feeling that sense of being embraced. And I think for the first time in my professional career, I was embraced on LinkedIn. I was contributing to discussions and people weren't talking over me. I was making observations and people were saying, wow, that was an astute observation. So I would say in terms of finding the why, a lot of it is just being open to the universe, right? I posted over the weekend, the universe is abundant. And I really do believe that. And I think I've always believed that, but I just didn't feel as though the abundance was coming my way. And I think maybe it was because I wasn't open and receptive to it. I just felt like, oh, that's not for me. That could never happen to me. And the truth is, anything is possible. Anything literally can happen to you as long as you are open to the idea of it and receptive to the idea of it. So I think that really would be in terms of finding my why and my ability to be an influencer on LinkedIn. I think that has been primarily the vehicle that I've used to be open and receptive, and literally anything that can happen, be open to the prospect of that being the case, that it can happen. As far as using networking, social media, and my personal brand to develop my why, I think that the biggest tip or strategy I would suggest as far as using social media is there's a few different things, because sometimes people will ask me, well, how were you able to develop your following? How were you able to mobilize and be an influencer in this way? I went from last year when I first got on LinkedIn, I had about 7,000 followers. As of now, I have about 60,000 plus followers. The podcast is really pretty big. It has, we've had about 200 episodes, about 50,000 streams. And I think for me, the biggest part about being a social media influencer, really just on LinkedIn, I don't necessarily use as much the other platforms like Instagram and Facebook, even though I'm a user of them. I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily put content out on the other platforms. One of the things I think with LinkedIn was that, and even Clubhouse, I'm a user of Clubhouse as well, but I haven't been as consistent with the content. And I think for me, as far as using social media, particularly LinkedIn, because that's the area where I've been influential as far as being named the top voice and having growing that following over the past year. I think the biggest thing would be consistency and also giving. I think, and this is, I know that Danette believes this as well, I think you have to give before you can get. I just saw someone that I'm actually know professionally that wants to do some coaching. And I saw that she posted, hey, if you are looking for leadership coaching or something like that, DM me. And my initial thought was, this was like, I've never really seen this person post on LinkedIn. And I think sometimes people that get into wanting to start a business, or especially wanting to coach or do some kind of consulting or something of that nature, there's more of, and I see this a lot on LinkedIn with people that are doing LinkedIn consulting, profile optimization, marketing, any type of service. A lot of times there is an ask, and I get that in my inbox. I have hundreds of messages in my inbox of people asking me for things. And I'm not opposed to helping people. I love to help people. I've been a teacher. Like I said, pretty much half of my higher education career has been dedicated to teaching. So I do love to help people. However, I think in terms of being able to mobilize yourself and use LinkedIn and other social network platforms and mobilize your brand, the biggest thing I would suggest for anyone is to give before you ask for anything. I think people really respond. Anyone, it's just human nature, will respond better to people asking them for things if they feel that though that person is genuine and that person doesn't just only have their own best self-interest in mind when they are asking. And I think for me, I really didn't go into LinkedIn with any expectations of getting anything. I really just wanted to interact with people and just kind of put my own thoughts out and really be able to help people if I could. As I was really processing the murder of George Floyd, that was initially what it started out as, me just using LinkedIn as a sounding board and talking about disparity, talking about inequity, talking about things that bothered me. I didn't start out, going in people's DMs and asking them for anything or saying, hey, do you know so-and-so at this company or anything like that. I really just started to put content out there and hope that that content resonated with people. And I think the same thing is true whether you're job searching, whether you're starting a business, whether you're being a consultant, whether you're coaching, really anything. If you put content out there, it really establishes you as you giving before you're asking for something. Even if it's just you're job searching and you're like, how do I distinguish myself? If there's 100 candidates for this position and it's a position that I really want, what can I do to help to get myself in a competitive situation? And probably the first instinct is not necessarily going to be the best one, which might be, let me just DM someone that works at the company, or let me see if I can network with people. I think before doing that, the best thing to do is to start to get, which might be, if people from that company are posting, engaging on their posts so that your name becomes familiar. It might be making connections in terms of posting content, whether it's articles in your field. And that's really what I started out doing. I really didn't start out creating my own original content. Initially, in terms of developing my brand, what I did was I just started putting content out there as far as articles and other things that I thought were interesting about higher education. And that's initially how I was able to become a co-host on the podcast, because a couple of my co-hosts, they were like, hey, you're putting out a lot of really interesting content about articles about education. We see you commenting on people's posts, and not just like good posts, but more like, hey, how come that is? Or what do you guys think about that? Really looking at how I could really get the conversation going. And that was really just because I was curious. I think in order to be just considered a thought leader, a part of being a thought leader is also having curiosity about whatever your subject matter expertise is. So if that's marketing, if that's business, if that's accounting, if that's whatever topic you are, nonprofit agencies, whatever your subject matter expertise is in, then you would have a curiosity about that. You would want to find out more. You would want to engage people in conversation about things that you're curious about. Because I don't think, even for me that's been in higher education for 20 years, I don't think any of us really are going to know every single thing about our subject. So putting information out there, even if it's not your own original content, but just speculating. Here's an article that I just saw in this newspaper article or this magazine article. Let's talk about this. Like, what do you guys think about this? Polls were another thing that I would post something, and I don't think the poll feature wasn't really like last year. Now it's starting to get really good where people are actually posting really interesting polls, but I would just put up a question and be like, hey, in the comments, what do you guys think? So that's another way of just putting yourself out there as a thought leader. And I think for some of us, we don't feel like thought leaders. We run our job. It's like other people know way more than I do, but that's fine because those people are not posting. LinkedIn as a whole, even with 600 million, almost 700 million, and it's actually on the low end as far as other social media platforms, only about 1% or so of people are actually posting. So if you're posting, even if it's just an article a week and just saying, hey, what does everybody else think about that? And it's fine if you don't get a lot of interaction in the beginning. When I first used to post, I would get like a handful of people would like my post, or a few people would comment. Now, the latest post that I put up over the weekend had like 4,000 likes or whatever you want to call them, and maybe I don't know how many comments and how many thousands of views. because that's something I think that happens over time. I think another thing in terms of the social media aspect of it, and I didn't really know this because I wasn't a content creator, I was just an absorber of content previous to the past year. But I think maybe from just talking to other people, another issue with putting content out there and using it to mobilize yourself and using it to separate yourself from other people on a platform, other job hunters, other people that are trying to create a brand for themselves, is the consistency aspect of it. I think for me, initially when I would post, I'm like, nobody cares about this. Like, why am I posting? But I cared. So I really used LinkedIn more as my therapy. It wasn't really that I was even, because people were like, oh, how did you do that? I didn't start out trying to do it. And I think maybe that was a part of why it resonated, because I didn't seem thirsty. I wasn't trying to get people to like my posts or trying to get a following. It was really more like this was me just working through my own questions or my own thought processes, whether it's about higher education and our role in social justice and why we weren't doing enough. And then later it started to become more about other areas of advocacy after George Floyd was killed, and working through a lot of the questions that I had about that. And I was just consistent. There are times, I think since George Floyd was killed, I don't think I've gone a day without posting. And that's not necessarily going to work for everybody. Not everyone necessarily wants to post that much. Like, that's just been my own personal journey. I spoke with Mayan Gordon, who's a huge TikTok influencer. She has like 2 million subscribers, followers on TikTok. And one of the things that she said, we actually interviewed her on the podcast very early when we last year when we first started the podcast. And one of the things that she said was that she posts, maybe if someone posts like 3 days a week, that's a lot. So I think that another, in terms of utilizing networking and social media to create your brand, another thing is to think about that is that people's memory is really short when it comes to social media. So being consistent is important, and being able to just make sure that you create some kind of routine for you. I see a question about scheduling days and times and being a work in progress and tips regarding consistency. Some people use social media planners, like some people use Hootsuite and other, like I know Canva has a planner in there, and there's a lot of other free planners that are out there where you can utilize it to post all over social media. I don't use them only because I think that I'm a lot more organic when it comes to posting. Initially, when I first started posting, I was posting a lot more like motivational quotes and different things that I think would lend themselves to being a little bit more scheduled, and just like, okay, I have 3 pieces of content, and at noon on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, these 3 pieces of content are going out. To be honest, for me, and maybe that's another reason why my journey has been one that resonates with people, is I'll get up in the morning, and I think like the morning that Ma'Khia Bryant was killed, I woke up and I was literally hyperventilating. I was crying because I thought, wow, I've seen knife fights. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale in South Florida, and I've seen, girls get into fights, and I could have witnessed someone being killed if that the criteria is, well, kids that are fighting with a knife, if they shouldn't do that, they're just gonna be shot by the police because they should listen. And I was really devastated by that. So that morning when I woke up, I posted about it. So I think for me, a lot of the things that I post are what's on my heart. A lot of it is things that concern me or distress me. Maybe that's not always the best thing because, a lot of it is for me dealing with the trauma that's going on around the country. But if it's something that's not necessarily an emotional situation, that's not going to trigger you, I do feel as though there is the ability, like in the initial stages when I was posting about social media and higher education on social media like LinkedIn, then I would just say, just stick with a schedule. It's almost like working out or going to the gym. If you know that, hey, I have a goal to go to the gym 3 days a week and I want to make sure I do that, then you would put it on your calendar. You would make sure that this is like, regardless of what happens, these are the days I have to go. And I think with anything, with habit, I kind of think about this from the direction of being a teacher. Writing is the same thing. yeah, and passion will drive your consistency, because initially when I first started posting, I didn't post as much. And the more that I got, I think, invested in the idea that my voice had traction and people were reaching out to me and saying, thank you for posting. I was feeling a lot of what you said, and I'm so glad that somebody said it. So I think that in the beginning, when I was posting about higher education, I wasn't as motivated. I would post like maybe one day a week and I'd be like, I don't have anything else to say. But I think that's another part of the why. If it's almost like evangelizing, if you really care about something, or like what Danette is doing, she is like relentless about this because it's her passion. It's something that she really feels strongly about. So I think as you work through kind of your own journey of, well, what is important to me? What do I have? Something that I like, if there is one thing I want, somebody gave me this tip actually this past week. What is the one thing you want to be remembered for, Liz? What do you want people to say about you? If you weren't here, what would be the one thing you'd want to be remembered by? And I think that is where this come from, this idea of, well, this is almost like, it's almost like being a mom. Like no one has to tell me like to get up in the middle of the night and take care of my son because I love him so much. So it's that drive and that determination and that goal of whatever happens, I have to do this. This is something that needs to get done, and you don't deviate from that. So I think as your passion becomes more evident to you, then it will be something that you feel called to do or you feel driven to do. And I think that Rhonda makes a really good point in terms of the idea that I think I kind of want to say, you know, just from like Jay-Z just dropped his new album, right? Or actually DJ Khaled and Jay-Z and Nas had a song on there. And there's this whole idea, right? Game recognizes game. And I think on social media, people are hip to the idea if someone seems to be kind of not really being legitimate. It seems like they're just doing something for likes, or it seems like they're just doing something because it's just like the in thing to do. And I think I see that a lot in the social justice area where maybe people are just putting stuff out there, even with social media, even with LinkedIn branding. It seems to be just something to put out there just to kind of get attention. And I think if it's something that you are passionate about, then people do pick up on that authenticity. So you don't want to just be like, okay, I'm going to post 3-4 times and I want to make sure I get this out there and it's going to be a routine. And I want to, because people do kind of look at that and they're like, that looks a little bit contrived, right? So I definitely feel as though there is, and of course, there's a business aspect of it as well, where you for me, I want it to be something that I'm passionate about, but then at the same time, you know, I do want to make sure that, you know, I'm putting information out there about my podcast. So there are podcast posts that, you know, we have sponsors and those are like non-negotiable. So those have to go out, right? So there's the passion part of it, and then there can be the business part of it. And I think that there can be a marriage between the two. It's just like being like with my husband, right? We have business, we have bills, we have so many things that we have to take care of, but then we have the love aspect and we have the parenting aspect as well. So there's nothing wrong with marrying the two, and you know that there's business. So if there are certain things that you have to do for your job, whether it's like if you're doing marketing, if you're doing business, you can put posts out there and say, okay, these are certain posts for the week that I know have to go out there. But then I think as you develop your brand and there are things that you become known for, there are things that people are aware that are passion projects for you, and they may be intricately affiliated with what your subject matter expertise is as well, that those can kind of drive some of that passion so people can kind of peek a little bit behind the curtain. I think a lot of some of the ones that I see on LinkedIn in particular that are very influential in terms of their ability to develop their brand and to be an influencer. A lot of those are people that they're able to marry very well, the business aspect of it, as well as that authenticity piece, and create that crossover where I come from a sales background as well, even though I've been in education. My start in education was in recruiting, and I always feel like everything is sales. So I was never a really good closer, but I was always good at building rapport. So I think for me, I always think that people don't want to buy from someone that they don't like, you know? So you, in a sense, even when you're in selling somebody something, if you go buy a car, you go buy a washing machine, if you don't like that person, unless you're really desperate, a lot of the time you're not going to buy from them. Maybe you're going to buy, but you won't buy from that person. So I feel as though, even though there is that business aspect of it, there is that passion, there is also the likability piece and being able to create that persona where people can say, wow, I like that person, you know, and it's not necessarily fake. It's just giving a piece of yourself where people can see who you really are and see that rawness and see your personality, and they can have an opportunity to get to know you and peek a little bit behind the curtain. You don't have to give them everything, but I think just like in any sales environment where, and even if you're looking for a job, that's sales, because you're selling yourself as a candidate. If you're selling services, if it's coaching, or even if you're just, you know, you're in your job and you still want to be looked at as a subject matter expert, you're selling this idea that you know what you're talking about. But still, in order to know, for people to want to hear what you have to say, they have to like you. They have to feel. So I think when we have managers, it's the same thing. If we have a manager and we feel like that manager is like, oh, I don't really like that manager, then you're less likely to want to hear what they have to say, as opposed to someone that shows their personality, is able to give you a piece of who they really are, and they're able to marry the interpersonal as well as the professional. I think that really is that key piece, because people tend to gravitate toward things that they like. They tend to gravitate toward things that resonate with them. So it doesn't mean I say everything that's going on in my life, but I give snippets so that people can get a little bit of an idea of who I really am and create that connection. I think a lot of this is all about connections when it comes to branding. Who are you? And then what are you able to give potential employers, potential clients, other people that you want to network with? I think the people that I initially networked with on LinkedIn, I was able to create these professional friendships, and these friendships, a lot of them were on par with friendships that I had with people that I knew on my job in the office before COVID. So being able to create that rapport and being able to develop those relationships, I think, is a really key part of enhancing your career. Because I've had several opportunities just come across, you know, my email even today, from people that are like, wow, I heard you talk, or wow, you know, we've networked on here and here's an opportunity. So I definitely feel like there's a lot to be said for all these relationships that are being developed, whether it's in this group, in Corona Days Professional Development organization, in your networking group, whether it's on LinkedIn or these other avenues in terms of social media. I met my husband on social media. I believe in the power of social media, because I feel as though it can be just as powerful as far as the relationships that can be built, the friendships that can be developed. Danette, there's so many amazing people that I've met through just talking to them and creating some of these shared experiences. So there's definitely a lot to be said about the idea of creating this personal brand, being able to mobilize this personal brand, being able to be consistent and be a friend. You know, I think that's really what it boils down to, being a friend and giving before you get. And I think that's what a good friend is all about. That good friend is that person that gives without expecting anything in return. I think I've talked a lot, Danette. Do we? Yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I just want to make sure I leave enough time for questions.
No, but I want people to hear you talk. You know why? Because you have people on and they talk, right? So you ask the question and you give a little insight, but I want people to hear you. And I know it's probably not the most comfortable thing for you, right? To talk.
Yeah. I'm very aware of, I think that I don't want to talk so much that I don't give people opportunity to kind of absorb what I'm saying and make sure that it makes sense, and make sure that, you know, it's not, doesn't sound. Another thing too, and this is something I have to work on as well, is sometimes I feel like, you know, people ask me this all the time as well, in terms of everything that's happened over the past year, like, you know, how did you do it? And I always find myself kind of like, oh, it was nothing. So that's just something I have to work through as well, like kind of like downplaying what's happened, and kind of that balance between making sure I'm being accurate about what happened, because obviously, you know, it was very unexpected, but then not.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
need to celebrate yourself.
absolutely. And I think that's a part of the struggle, that even when I'm talking internally, I'm like, oh, don't brag. Stop, stop being so, so it's like I try to dial it back while still being accurate about what happened, because it was, I mean, even the CNN article, it literally happened because someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and was like, I saw your post. Do you want to do a CNN op-ed piece? And I'm like,
Yay.
an op-ed piece for CNN? Okay. So, yeah, there's a lot of power there, because the people that you meet, Bracken Darrell, who's the CEO of Logitech, he came on the podcast, and literally he was on my profile, and I'm like, why is the CEO of Logitech looking at, because I have LinkedIn Professional, so I'm like,
yeah.
And then he came on there, I think it was either 20 minutes later or maybe the next day, and I just DM'd him, I'm like, can I help you? You want to come on a podcast?
He was looking at your profile. Yeah, I always look at who looks at my profile. If you're looking at my profile, you better believe I'm getting in your inbox.
I'm inboxing you because you must want something. What are you looking for?
Yeah, why you keep looking at me? Because I've been looking at you, right?
Exactly. That's literally what I DM'd him, like, hey, what's going on? You interested in coming on a podcast? And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like literally 2 minutes later, DM me. So there's a lot of power on LinkedIn. I think sometimes people kind of feel like LinkedIn is just not as popping as like a Facebook or Twitter, which is actually my primary, like IG. Those are like my go-tos. But over the past year, LinkedIn has become like my primary place in terms of networking and developing a lot of those relationships. I think I'm always on IG. I go on Facebook all the time. I go on Twitter periodically. But I think LinkedIn, in terms of just the professional development and the personal development and the networking aspect, it has become like the biggest place as far as me being able to have those opportunities. So
yeah, I love it. What's your little one's name?
What's your name?
Joey.
Joey. This is my first time seeing you. Have you jumped on the lives before?
This is the first time. I don't know what got into him today.
I love the little guys. Maybe that was it.
I never does that. He was told to be in the room until I got off the podcast. But clearly.
Hey. I love it. And I wanted you to talk because I feel like that's going to be in your future. A lot more talking. Not like you're not going to write. I already said I'm pre-ordering the book. I said that months ago.
Yes, and the strange thing about it, and I guess I shouldn't say strange, but I actually did have from Clubhouse a connection with an agent. So I'm working with the agent now on a book proposal.
Always good, yeah.
So that's going to be the next thing. Is going to be definitely working on a book, and she feels like it would be something that I could actually push through a publisher.
So you don't want to self-publish. Now, I'm nothing against anybody who's self-published.
No,
that's a lot of work.
And that's the thing. I talked to a couple people at LinkedIn. Like one of them is one of the editors. He's actually a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he said the same thing. He was like, "There's nothing wrong with self-publishing, but if you can go the publisher route, it's like you won't make as much money because obviously the publisher has to put out a lot." But he was just like, "I would." And then when I talked to her, she said the same thing. She was just like, "I would take it to a publisher."
That access that we need, that's what we need. We need that access. You get that access, that exposure, and it's not coming. I mean, it is coming out of your pocket, but you're not peeling off of money you have
exactly
at that moment. Exactly. So I love it. I'm so happy for you that you are moving in that direction. So a couple things before I go to my regular questions. So, Key, I heard a couple things. So you like to write.
I love to write.
You love to write. Okay, guys, you're listening, right? Because we're talking about finding your why. Okay. So Liz loves to write. Then you got on LinkedIn. Well, you were already on LinkedIn, but you began to post on LinkedIn, and you begin to get something that oftentimes we don't get professionally, right? This sort of validation, right? For something that you do well, but but you might have even doubted yourself that you do that thing well,
Oh
right?
yeah,
But
big time.
yeah, right. So guys, I'm saying this because I think these are keys, right? When you say like finding your why, right? So sometimes we do things really, really well. Like you're an excellent writer, right? But you may not have, hey, thank you for joining from Kenya. You know, that's my second home. And I always love my Kenyans. So yeah, so it's and if you had had that validation earlier, you probably would not be the Liz that we know today, right?
Right.
Because you
That's
wouldn't
it.
have been drawn to this social media platform to
Right.
express yourself, right? So
Right.
I love it. And the other thing I love,
I got a
guys,
lot of,
is
I think when I went to undergrad, I went to school for journalism, even though I ended up being
mhm,
education. So I did get a lot of this whole imposter syndrome of, am I going to be good enough? This is so competitive. So I think sometimes you do talk yourself out of your gift. You know, it's something that you know that you're really good at. As far as the media aspect and the writing aspect, it was something that I had done my whole life, but I started to really feel like, well, maybe that's not really my place. It's something that I'm not going to be able to do professionally. And I did back away and ended up like making a full circle right back to
do it. Yeah.
media and everything else. Somebody asked if Clubhouse was going to impact the use of social media and my personal use. I like Clubhouse. I just feel as though right now I didn't have as much time to dedicate to putting out the quality content, and I feel as though for me, because I had put so much effort into podcasting, into writing on LinkedIn, it just felt like I was just kind of multitasking and stretching myself a little bit too thin. I probably will circle back around to Clubhouse, but I feel as though for me, because I have the podcast and I'm already recording several podcast episodes a week. We now have a podcast network with about 15 other podcasters, and then also working on LinkedIn, which is pretty much work because it's posting, daily. And then also thinking about writing a book. That's been my primary focus. But yeah, I think the Clubhouse has a lot of potential. I think I'm just, I guess, waiting to see, how all of my other stuff falls into place before I kind of dedicate too much time to Clubhouse. But I definitely, it is interesting to go on there for sure.
Yeah, and on the Clubhouse. So I'm sorry, guys. I have bad sound. I forgot my speaker at home. You guys know I'm home in New York. Okay, so I'm not home at my house. I'm with my family. The Clubhouse thing. I think that too goes back to being who you are, right? So there's so many. You could be Twitter, you could be IG, you could be Facebook, you could be LinkedIn, you could be Clubhouse, and then they have these new versions of Clubhouse, like these other apps that are coming.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
And I love Clubhouse, and it works very well for me because I like to run my mouth, right? And I love to connect with people. But I also know that my place is LinkedIn, right? Because I need to always connect with different people. I need to connect with people. I need to be able to read about them. I don't need to, I need to connect with them in a different way. So I'm not going to leave the Clubhouse, but I think for all of you guys that you have to decide for yourselves, like, what are you most comfortable? What platforms are you most comfortable on? And then you focus on those, right? And so it might not be the platform that you get the most response with, right? So, but we have so many that we can jump into, and I love that. Yeah, Kenya's in the house. So I don't know who is here, but you guys know I lived in Kenya for 3 years, so I'm glad you guys are here. I love Kenya. Yes, it is 1 a.m. I know. So Liz, what gave you the confidence to overcome imposter syndrome?
I think it goes back to what you said, Danette, which was that positive reinforcement. I had not gotten that. As a writer, I think it's almost like being an actor or being a singer, right? It's a creative process, and not everyone can do it or do it well. So I think sometimes when you go to school or you've been writing or doing something else that's somewhat creative, it might be art, it might be graphic design, something where it's like, okay, it's not just black or white, right? It's not like, okay, business where it's like you're doing an accounting spreadsheet, it's either wrong or it's right. With something like writing or art or singing or acting, it's always up to somebody's interpretation. If it's up to me and you, Viola Davis gets the Oscar, but if it's up to somebody else, it's going to be somebody else. So that is very subjective. It's not objective. It's not left or right. And I think for me, as a writer, I did psych myself out. Going to school, a lot of, the rhetoric that I heard, I went to a top journalism school, was it's hard out there. If you're not good, you'll get eaten up by the sharks. You might not get a job in a newsroom. It's very competitive. And I did start to feel like, oh, maybe this is just too hard. How am I going to do this? This is a lot. And going on LinkedIn is actually where I got a lot of validation. I would do like a little tiny post and people would be like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And I was like, really? Like, oh, okay, I can write. And I had been used to writing like articles and people being like, yeah, whatever. So when I would do like a little post and people would be like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, I did start to get that confidence. And I think that's why communities like this is really important, because it gives you that like positive feedback and that positive reinforcement, and people that have your best interest. I think a lot of times when you're in like maybe a work environment, for example, or you're in a school environment, it's very competitive. And in environments like this, it's kind of like, hey, we all win. Let's all support each other. Let's all see what we can do to help each other. Let's all network. Even with LinkedIn, even though everyone's job hunting or everyone's a professional, we're all in so many different fields. And even if we are in the same field, we're all over the country. So there isn't that sense of, oh, there's a lack. It's like, hey, there's enough for everybody. So I feel like there is more of a, let's encourage each other. If I have an opportunity, I've like referred so many people, and so many people have referred, business to me or opportunities to me. So I think that validation is the primary way that I was able to overcome a lot of I've gotten so much more confident. I always felt like a reasonably confident person, but my confidence level, just even on a personal level, just in how I parent and how I interact with my husband, has changed a lot over the past year, because I just feel more secure, because I don't feel like I'm always second guessing myself. So yeah, I think that is important.
Yeah, we need that validation, and many of us don't get it. And when we get it definitely helps. Because I could think back at my own career at the times where it came from the most unlikely places, and so I knew it was pure, right? And so it was easy for me to believe that, oh yeah, so that I am really, because it was pure. No, they didn't have anything to gain by pouring into me, right? So this other thing I love, because you are one of the. So now it's a year I've been totally doing it. So our anniversary was last Monday. And maybe
congratulations.
And so I've seen a lot in the past year on LinkedIn. This has been a lot of, all kind of stuff, So, but you are one of 3, in my opinion, straight organic growth that just went wow, right? I'm not going to call the other 2, but 2 of you are LinkedIn top voices, right? And I watched it, and it was very real, right? It wasn't measured and outlined, and it was just really real and authentic. And so I love that, because it demonstrates what we all say all the time, that if you show up as who you are, the people who are for you, right? Either they want to pour into you, or they feel that you are pouring into them, they're going to show up and show out. And that's exactly what you did. Like, you demonstrated, right? Because I know other people, like I speak to you, so I speak to other people, and I know people, either they use Hootsuite or they write all their content out a week in advance. And, like, everybody has their own system, like, I post when I move to post, even if it's an affirmation. Like, I feel like, oh, I want to give the guys the affirmation. I go on Canva, I get my little video. I'm not a video person. It takes me forever to do something that might take you 10 minutes, right? I post up an affirmation. So, whatever I post is what I feel. And I feel like people gravitated to you because of that. Now there's that, right? And I love it. So it's this real organic growth, right? And I'm not a LinkedIn. Don't come at me because I'm not the LinkedIn authority. The people who feel like there are more of us out here.
But
No,
you know what though? The thing is, I think sometimes people get very caught up in that. And I'm so glad that you said that, because not to say that there's anything wrong with it. Like you said,
yes,
there are people that are doing
yeah,
that. But I think people get very caught up with the algorithm and
yeah,
when's the best time to post and how many times should I post and what gets the most traction. And I'm like you, I'm just like, whatever moves me is what I post about. Obviously, I know that there's certain things that get more traction. But thank goodness the things that get more traction are the things that I tend to want to post, which is just raw. I'm coming, you getting it. It is what it is. Either you like it or you don't. And those are actually the things that I was afraid to post. Like in the very beginning, I'm like, I can't post that. People will be like repulsed by that. And the more that I was like, you know what, I was doing the Viola Davis cry. I was just like, it was tears coming down. It was not coming down my face because I was just so upset. And people would be like, oh my God, that is awesome. So it's just, you just don't know what will resonate with people
no,
because you're so busy trying to be, and this is not for everybody, because there are some people that are on there, they're very business and it is what it is. But there's a reason why there are people like Shay Robot, and the reason why there's people like Gary Vee, because people gravitate that because they're like, he don't care. He's just going to say whatever's on his mind. No matter how people say it's bro culture or this or that, there are people that want that. So, hey, speak to those people because you're connecting with those people. There's something that you're giving them that they want. So
yeah, that they need. Most
that they need.
need it, yeah. And they're, what we have had going on over the past year and what drove you to begin to show up as your authentic self on LinkedIn is we had a lot of that. We had a lot of people, expressing the way they felt about, George Floyd and Brianna and Ahmaud, and it was just everybody was out, and it was Black Lives Matter, and then those voices just disappeared. But you're here, right? And that doesn't mean that they weren't authentic in the way they were feeling, right? And it could be that they needed that outlet, right? I needed to do that on LinkedIn for a couple months or Twitter or wherever it was, and that's that. But you're still feeding, and the other day, I think it was, you said you posted up 60,000. I was like, what the heck? Oh, sorry, joke. I was like, what? Really? Like, she's still growing? Like I was like, wow.
I get like about 2,000 followers a week, something like that.
No, I was like, yeah. So what I'm saying is you are still feeding people, right? And so don't stop. Right now, it means that I know, and I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I just feel like
I love what I'm doing.
Crouching and doing other ways of feeding people, whether it's speaking and in your book. And hey Chantel, hey Marcello, South Florida, yeah, Liz is in South Florida. And you think you guys are real close, same area. So yeah, I love Florida. Not only that you're still here, because there are others, please people, I know there's still others who are still, but I'm just saying there were so many. You're still here, and you've allowed that to be the vehicle that moves you to other issues, right? So it allows you to focus and shine a light on things that other people are not brave enough, right, to shed light on. Like I told, and it's not about brave for me, but I was telling you in future, the work you guys do is not my work. That's not my calling.
Right.
And I respect the work that you guys do. And I know it's difficult work. You put yourself, like literally you're putting yourself on the firing line, because I don't like when people troll me, right? And I don't nearly have as many trolls as you guys have, right? So I love it. And I just want, I don't even want, I love it. And
I know. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do. And it is, I think it's a balancing act. And I think that, like you said, there is something that you're called to do. I couldn't do what you do. You know what I mean? So I think everyone has their gift, and it really circles back to this whole concept of finding your why. You have your gift. It's just a matter of mining that. What are the diamonds inside you? What is it that you have to give what is the gift that you have for the world? What can you provide the world with? And I think for me, it has become almost like, it's almost just like how some people, you're just like, oh my gosh, that person goes to the gym every day, or oh my gosh, that person eats so healthy, or oh my gosh, that person, whatever that is that that person does, and it's just a lifestyle for them. It becomes something that is a part of who they are. It almost becomes, motherhood, whatever it is, that this is just integral to who you are as a person. Then that is your routine. That is what you do, is that you get up and it's like you don't even think about it. And I think that this has become that for me. It was just like how I've been in education for so long. I never thought about it. People would be like, oh, you go in the classroom and you got to be in front of the students. And I'll be like, yeah, this is what I do. It's no big deal. It's just my thing. And I think this has become that, where it's become, well, this is just another extension of me giving and wanting to provide some kind of, I think, it's almost like providing an outlet for other people, by me being able to step out and say things that people maybe want to say, but maybe don't have the words to say, and also maybe just are not able to. I've had people tell me, I would love to say that, but people on my job are watching me, or, I don't want people to look at me a certain way. And I'm like, well, that's fine, because I'll say it for you, and then you can just like it, or even if you don't like it, even if you scroll by and you smile, that's me giving of myself and giving something. And it I would say for me, and I put this as a part of the post I did over the weekend, giving has given me so much more than I could get. And I know that you know how that feels, because it's almost like the giving has actually helped me more than anything else, because I was in a really bad place after George Floyd was killed. I had a lot of, anxiety. I was really in a place of, I would be shaking, I would just be going about my daily routine, maybe making him lunch or doing something else. And I would just drop everything and just start hysterically crying, because I'm just like, this world is so unfair. Like, how can this be? And I wasn't only talking about the murder, but also just in general, everything that was happening around the country, and just from a historical point of view. And that's where Black History and Culture Academy came in, because I'm like, okay, people don't really understand. This is not just about one event. This is about like the beginning of time from the motherland until today. This is not about one event that happened and people feeling upset about one event. So a lot of even developing the courses in Black History and Culture Academy, now it has 20 classes. I'm working on like another 20. So by Juneteenth, I'll have about 50 classes. And it's just me thinking, how come people don't know about redlining? And I'll just develop a class about it.
And I
understand what microaggressions are, and I'll develop a class about it, So I think it's just narrowing down what that passion is and then creating a vehicle for it,
Well, Liz, one of the things I think you are doing is you are becoming what your tribe was for you. Your validators, the people who validated you are validating feelings that other people have, right? And so those people who say like, I wish I could say that, right? You are not just saying it publicly for them, but you are saying to them that it's okay for you to feel that way. Yes. It's okay for you to think that. And that's so powerful, because the people around us, oftentimes, when we're not status quo and we think differently, can have us to believe that our thoughts we're crazy, right? And so you are validating, that tens of thousands of people with your messages every day.
And Rhonda made a good point about this feeling of being drained, and that's normal too. I think that these kinds of topics are very emotional. It's also traumatic, and it's important to step away if you do feel drained. I think sometimes there are times when I'm seeing a lot of this news, especially the violence in terms of like some of the shootings, when Devontae Wright and then Ma'Khia Bryant, and it was just like one thing after another. There was a few days where I just like took some time away, because I do relate to that feeling of not necessarily wanting to post about things. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes as a social justice warrior as well, people feel like I judge if people aren't posting about it. You know what I mean? Like, how come you're not posting about it too? And I'm like you, I'm like quick to say, well, it's not everyone's bag, like I could never do what you do. This is amazing what you do. And I don't have the skill set, because it's just not my area of expertise. So I don't I don't think that everyone should post about it. I don't think everyone wants to post about it. I think last year this time I was not posting about it, and if someone was posting about it, I would like scroll past and like I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Because it was traumatic, you know what I mean? So I think that it's okay to feel that trauma, and it's fine to not want to engage and talk about it, because I don't think everyone has to talk about it, but I do feel like the people that do talk about it, it's important for them to talk about it, because it has to be talked about. It just depends on the person, just like this has to be talked about, this idea of professional development and all the trauma that's happened around COVID and how people were really struggling, and what can we do to help those that are struggling and finding ways for them to overcome these challenges. That's important. It's just, that's not my area, but it does need to be talked about. So it's the same thing I think with anything else. If it's LGBTQ, if it's race, if it's Corona days and us all feeling overwhelmed as we all are, who can articulate that? You know, you can articulate it way better than I ever could. So I think that's the same thing with anything that, you know, is out there. It's like, who can mobilize and find ways to overcome these challenges, whatever these challenges are.
Yeah. And did you read the book Yes by Elizabeth?
You know, it's so funny that you say that. I literally just emailed someone about that, because I'm in the works with a college on the West Coast about teaching a course. That is actually the book that I'm suggesting. I haven't read it yet, but I'm suggesting it for required reading for the class I'm going to teach.
Yeah, you have.
You've read it. You have a good.
Isabel Wilkerson. Now it's interesting because CDPD deals with the class. You deal with the cast. Cast comes, right? So, and then comes class. We deal with the class of it, right? The the people who have been marginalized, which some of them can be of the dominant caste, right?
Right.
You are dealing with the bare basic of it, the cast, and the cast is us. You know, I can't hide who I am, so I am automatically in that cast, right?
Correct.
So, and it just is. Once you read it, let's talk. We can even have.
I was gonna say, because I'm so glad. It's just so funny because I even emailed her and said I haven't read it yet, but I've gotten so many good recommendations that I'm thinking that this is going to be the book that I want to use for the course. So I'm so glad you said that. Because you're like maybe the third or fourth person has told me that it's like an amazing book.
Yeah, and it further, I'm not going to say validates, but it further says to me the importance of my work, the importance of your work, and the people who still work in that lane, right? And just we got to get together.
Yes, I'm actually going to order it later today, and we got to talk about it because
guys,
I've been meaning to read it.
Yeah, and the parallels between India and the U.S. are interesting and and really real. That book is Caste, Caste, and it's Isabel Wilkerson, Lillian. Yeah, and Lillian, you're Kenyan. You'll understand some of so. You can compare caste systems in that book to tribalism in Kenya. So, and I know you're Kenyan, you know about that. Anyway, I'm gonna get ready to go on a whole thing.
It's interesting, you know, because me being from the UK, we have a lot of Indians, and it's from India, and there is this like system, this hierarchy. So I'm really fascinated.
So listen, okay, guys, I'm sorry, but okay, I'll just share this. So in the book, in India, they call them the untouchables, are the lowest class of people. Okay, in India, they're the people who do the worst work. They're not even the people who will probably be cleaning your house. They'll be cleaning the sewer, right? So those are the untouchables. Well, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went to India, they introduced him as what? A fellow untouchable. We are compared. They themselves are like, yeah, you've amassed, not great wealth, but you got, great notoriety, and we are respecting you. But they were looking at him as like, you're an example of we could get out of this, because you're one of us. I mean, it's a lot going on in there, but
I have to read this. This
but you have
sounds
to read it. It's like
deep.
Yeah, like you are in your cast and you can't get out of your cast.
Can't get out.
Right. And then it goes in like India, it'll be like, and you'll know this, Lillian, so you know how like you can tell what tribe someone is in, so they're not, they can't get here because they're in their tribe. Same thing, you can't get here because you're brown skin or you're dark skin or you're this or you're that or whatever the case may be. Or in India, you can't get here because you look a certain way or you're of this place or you're in that caste. We could go on and on about that, but read it and let's get together.
Oh yeah, we gotta revisit that because I'm literally, it's so weird, but I literally maybe like a couple hours ago emailed her and I'm like, you know what? Because we were talking about Ibram X Kendi. She was like, oh, it's like that's so kind of not played out, but everyone's talking about the book. So I said, you know what about caste? Because I've heard so many good things about it. And she wanted a woman author too. So I was like, what about Isabel Wilkerson? Because that's just one that just keeps coming up again and again. So I'm really excited to read it because it seems fascinating, this whole.
I mean, like the parallels are just. Okay, so we have to wrap up, guys. Rhonda, I don't think you can read that book. We'll talk about it. You can't do racism. You can't do caste. Caste is worse than racism.
Yeah, she was saying that the movie Rosewood. I would tell Rhonda that when I lived in Gainesville, not too far from where, like 20 minutes away from where Rosewood happened in North Florida, and I literally called out of work the next day. Like when I first saw that movie, when it first came out, I was just like, oh my gosh, this was like horrific. The idea that things like this actually happen. So there's a lot of trauma, and I think it's for me, a lot of my calling has been to try to work through a lot of that trauma and just understand it. And that's why I'm always trying to read new stuff. I want to hear other people's perspectives. So I really want to hear what Isabel Wilkerson has to say about a lot of this, because it's a lot of it's historical. This is not something that's new. So it's didn't just happen last year. This has been from the beginning of time. So
yes. Okay. I'm not gonna do any more fun questions. Let me go to I'm gonna go to my questions because we went long, but we always talk about when we get to
I know.
Look, this is Martin Pratt's live, guys. So I go as long as a guest wants to stay, and as long as you guys stay on here, I go.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's home team, so he's gonna let you use it forever if you need to.
I stay right on here. I said someone stayed 2 hours, and we carry 15 people on LinkedIn and a number of people. He had about a good 15 on YouTube and maybe about a handful in our Facebook group for the whole 2 hours.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna go to some of my questions, guys. So if you could go back in time and tap a younger Liz on the shoulder, what would you say to her about anything?
I think I would probably talk to her about what we talked about today, like not to be scared, like not to second guess myself. Like don't second guess yourself, Liz. Don't think you can't do anything. Just try things. Do whatever you want. Don't be afraid. Just don't care about what people think. Just step out and just live. And I think I didn't do that when I was younger. So I would tell my younger self, live, try everything, just throw caution to the wind and just don't be afraid. That would be my biggest piece of advice for Liz.
I love it. Someone contacted me after our live and said, you guys are so confident. I don't have that kind of confidence. And I said, I'm not confident all the time. No. I do it afraid all the time, but I do it. You do it scared, do it afraid.
Right.
If it doesn't work, you're gonna die, right? Just do it.
That's it. That's literally the lesson. Is even if you are scared, I mean, you just try. You just do it. You just jump out there, and I mean, I literally just posted about that, like working through that. Like even if you're afraid, just try. What's for you cannot be taken from you. So you just step into things with that idea of abundance. Like anything is out there. Anything that you can think of, you can have. So just step out and grab, and whatever slips through your finger, that's fine. It probably wasn't for you anyway. Try something different.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna ask you my final question. I want two fun questions. Okay, bun and cheese or patty and cocoa bread. I just got every.
Oh, patty and cocoa
Patty
bread
and
for
cocoa bread.
sure.
Okay. Uh, and then an easy one. Skittles or Starburst? Or Starburst. Skittles or Starburst?
Skittles or Starburst?
Skittles or Starburst?
Skittles.
Skittles. All right. Skittles. Well, you did excellent for your first. It's Johnny, right?
Joey?
Joey, you did excellent for your first live. Yes, you did. You did really well. You're pretty photogenic too. You look good.
Okay.
All right. Okay. It's like this strange lady talking to me. Patty and Cocoa Bread all day says, "Who is that? I don't know. Someone who didn't let us see their name."
Yeah, LinkedIn users says patty and cocoa bread.
Patty
Somebody
and
else
Cocoa
says
Bread says
Skittles.
Skittles.
I love some
Okay.
Skittles.
Yeah.
And patty and cocoa bread. That's right. I eat, sometimes I just eat the cocoa bread on its own and just not even eat the patty. That's how much I love the patty, the cocoa
You
bread.
see all this extra on me. You know I love the bread. Cocoa bread all day.
Love it.
Okay, my final question is, guys, this is it. So if you have anything you want to say to Liz, drop it in the chat.
If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, they can always message me. I usually return messages right away, unless it's like Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I don't respond, but anything else, I respond right away.
And everywhere this is posted, guys, there are links to the EdUp experience and the it's the Academy. Say it again, Liz.
Oh, Black History and Culture
Black
Academy.
History and Culture Academy. Yes. So there are links there. So definitely check both of those out. I'll be on the EdUp experience eventually, but they're so popular. They have content.
We're back. We're backed up like 6 weeks now.
Believe it. I mean, everybody wants to be on there. I'm glad you guys.
Yeah, we're backed up like 6 weeks. We're trying to push out content, and we're pushing out like 3 episodes a week, and we have like 20 that haven't come out yet. It's gotten really crazy. Yeah.
So my final, guys, drop anything if you have anything else for Liz. So my final question, Liz, is considering everything we talked about in the last hour and 16 minutes. If you have one takeaway that, like, anybody, you want them to walk away with this, and it may be something you said already, and it might be something else, but what would one takeaway be?
I think my biggest takeaway would be when you're thinking about branding yourself and growing yourself as a social media influencer, or you're wanting to connect with people, is just be yourself, be real, be authentic, just use your gifts, what you currently have, and connect with other like-minded people. I think that's how you're one of my day ones. I told you this before. You're one of the people that I instantly connected with a year ago on LinkedIn. Even though we haven't always like talked every single minute, we always come back around to each other because I respect you and you're just very real. Like you said, as far as the ability to just give positive feedback, positive reinforcement. And I'm like, I know it's authentic because we're not even in the same like sector. We have no like there was really no reason for you to do that other than the fact that you're a genuine person and you want to see people win. So I think that is my biggest takeaway, is to connect with people and be your real, authentic, true self, and pour into people, and people will pour back into you.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Joey. I'm honored that you came on my live first. So thank you, Joey. I appreciate you. All right, guys. If you catch the replay, let us know that you're catching the replay. I love it. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate you because I know you're terribly busy. So, guys, thank you for
my
joining.
pleasure.
Yes. God bless you guys, and good night. All right.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.